everyone to another episode of Truth Control.
Happy New Year to all of you that are out there.
Hope you all had a great Christmas and New Year.
Well, some of us did, but others didn't, but it's all the same.
So, I'm Quinton.
And I'm Jessy.
And in this episode, we are going to be talking about duality, which involves good and bad, or good and evil.
Or, anyway, hot water, cold water, whatever you want to call it at this point. But I'll hand it over to you as far as your...
Yeah, I wanted to start this off with a quote by Manly Palmer Hall. And I'm sure if you listen to me, you'll know that I'm quite the fan of him. So here's a quote by him. And it says this. He says, "The universe is made up of successive graduations of good. These graduations ascending from matter, which is the least degree of good, to spirit, which is the greatest degree of good. In man, his superior nature is the summum bonum. It therefore follows that his highest nature most readily cognizes good, because the good external to him in the world is in harmonic ratio with the good present in his soul. What man terms evil is therefore in common with matter, merely the least degree of its own opposite. The least degree of good presupposes likewise the least degree of harmony and beauty." Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think simply what it's just saying is that, we're all good souls. We're always good.
And then we're in this
Physical form.
Yeah, he's saying it's all good, but the greatest degree, I guess, is the spirit form. And then in this physical form, we see a smaller degree of it, which
can sometimes turn into evil.
Which we might term evil, or yeah.
Yeah, which sometimes...
But obviously, like our higher self, spiritual being is, good.
Yeah.
It's love.
And in other words, I guess what it's also saying is that we're made out of this goodness, and out of this physical form, I guess only bad, evil comes out of it. Like, not only that, I don't want to interpret it like that, but we see only the evilness in this physical form, the bad in this physical form. It picks it up. Whereas in the spiritual form, it's all goodness. And
it's interesting, because what I want to say on that is, because even in this physical form, there's really no bad, right? Because it's all... pretty much everything's in action, or it's all energy.
It's a perception, I think.
Yeah, it depends on the perspective and the viewer who's viewing something, and their own individual discernment determining what's good and bad in a way. Because what's good to somebody is bad to another person, and what's bad to one person is good to another person.
But it also comes down only to the perception of that person, because I can be seeing something as so good, but maybe another person perceives it as bad.
Right, and it's like a little kid might perceive eating candy as good, but an adult might see it as bad because they know it's unhealthy. So there's different ways to look at it, right?
Yeah, and the thing is that people base everything on a duality system, which I think a lot of times, as I think you become more spiritual, more enlightened, if I might add, you start seeing things and you start realizing that there's not a lot of duality out there, that everything is really a lesson in life. So those things or situations that you perceived before as being bad were really probably an opening to a bigger window, where if you climbed in, you saw it as bad at that moment, but it probably opened a door for you.
And in a way, it's kind of like in Eastern religions and philosophy, like the yin and the yang, right?
Correct.
How the two duality polarities are working together.
To balance, they call it a balance.
Like, for instance, this quote from the Gospel of Philip, it says, "Light and darkness, life and death, right and left, are brothers of one another. They are inseparable. Because of this, neither are the good good, nor evil evil, nor is life life, nor death death." Which is basically saying how the two, they go together.
Yeah, and because they're one and the same. If we're all connected, if we're all a oneness, we are only perceiving with this physical form, which is matter, which is what we perceive with. and we're making it bad. But in actuality, in the spiritual world, it doesn't exist. It's just like men and women. It doesn't exist because there's no gender. There's no gender in that way of thinking, because there's no such thing as duality when it's oneness. Because at the point that you separate something, then you've already given it another name. Like, we can say, well, God is good and evil. Well, then we're already saying God is both things. We've already separated God when he's only one thing and oneness. Exactly. And so we've already given it a different definition. As soon as you separate, then you're already giving it meaning, therefore exploring another part of that and making it and giving it another name. Like in A Course in Miracles, I believe it's page 527. Don't quote me on that. I'm just it talks about that to that extent that we perceive everything as bad things. We start seeing things as bad, and so we fall prey to that, and we start seeing this darkness, and we start feeling like, oh my God, there's no open door. I only see dark. Everything in my life is going bad. But at the same time, if you realize that you're part of the light, that you are part of that bigger energy, which is God, which is the universe, then you would realize that at that instant, you can take yourself out of that, because it's just your perception that deals with the duality of things. And I think the more enlightened you become, the more you start to realize that duality really does not exist.
Right, and I agree with that.
So you had another quote?
Well, there's something I want to add to that too.
Sure.
With duality is pretty much everything has elements of, I guess, what you would term good and bad in it. Like, people see things in a very simplistic view. They see it as black and white in a lot of ways, and they use words to label things, which is not entirely accurate. It's not an accurate representation of what is really going on. Like, to call somebody like George Washington good, that's taking this huge guy, George Washington, all these different things that make him up, and just to say one label on him, good, it's not an accurate representation of him. He might be good in certain things, but in other things, he might not be good. Exactly. There's so much more to him than a freaking one label, you know?
Well, and I think that a lot of what you're saying there is true, because a lot of people would rather just like not see the bigger picture. They're just like, oh, he did a good thing, so then he's been represented.
Too. And it's like what Eckhart Tolle says, is people, they put labels in places of, they label things and they put it in place where things aren't the label. They're behind the label, what's behind the word, and people don't look at what's behind something. So like, for instance, like our history, we might say the American Civil War is like it was a good event to keep our nation together, to keep America together, or something like that. It'll be branded a certain way by history, and then that's just one way to look at it. It's not that you can't.
It's not the whole picture.
No, you can't.
People don't see the whole picture behind everything. Like you said about George Washington, he probably was a good man. But really, you can't describe him as good just because you read about him as being good.
Right, and then you have people like Adolf Hitler, where when people hear Hitler, they immediately think bad. But it's like, he's not just bad, he's all these different things, and if you would explore that, you would see there's good parts to him too, there's bad parts to him, there's all these different elements. It's not one label on a person, it's not that simple.
And I mean, Adolf Hitler was still part of the bigger picture, was still part of the universe, was still part of the oneness.
And then to tie into the labels, it somewhat fits in with like resolution on like television or video games. For instance, like older video games, like on the Nintendo, they used to have really kind of square, blocky, simple graphics. They didn't look at all like the video games now. Video games now, they have all these,
3D.
Yeah, they look pretty much like you and me in a video almost. They're like very high resolution. There's a lot more data going in. There's a lot more pixels representing something. Where in a Nintendo Entertainment System, there's a lot fewer pixels. So those pixels are kind of like words, and there's less words in an NES representing. Maybe there's only 100 different colored pixels representing an image, where in a newer system there might be, let's say, 1 million pixels representing something. So that's 100 labels versus 1,000,000 labels. One of them's less accurate. So you kind of see where I'm going with that?
Yeah, well, what I'm getting out of that with you in that perspective is like, I think that the picture starts getting more clear.
Yes.
And more clear.
And
the more you start understanding, the picture starts getting clearer for you. Like as far as like with me and duality, I mean, like, I understand now that hot and cold water are the same water. You know, there's no difference between the water. It's just the hot and the coldness of the water, as in the sea as well. I mean, a small drop is still part of the sea. It's still part of it, of the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And what we do a lot of times is we don't see the bigger picture behind things. We only see a small percentage. So let's say I see a person doing something that I consider to be bad. I right away label them as bad. But if I were to really look at that person in a spiritual level, and I was able to see everything on why he's doing what he's doing, then I would probably understand the reasoning behind him doing that bad thing. Absolutely. It's probably for him to grow, and it's his journey.
That brings me to a quote by Mark Booth here,
okay,
that I want to read. And he says, okay. He says, in Dostoevsky, we encounter the paradoxical notion that those who confront this evil, supernatural dimension, even if they are thieves, prostitutes, and murderers, are closer to heaven than those whose cozy worldview deliberately shuts evil out and denies it is there.
Correct. And what do you get out of that?
Well, I mean, it's basically, it's kind of like what we talked about before, like the prodigal son, where by doing these evil things, or what it's termed evil, you're right, it's basically an experience. It's not necessarily evil. It's just something that humans, But anyway, by doing these experiences, you're taking on new information, you're trying new things, you're learning new things that other people would shy away from and never know.
And so that person playing that part in this lifetime, let's say a prostitute, a thief, they took that challenge to grow in their spiritual environment. And whereas like a person that's more cozy, like it says, is not willing to take those because they're still limited to being cozy and afraid of doing things that this other person, maybe the thief, the prostitute, or the killer, per se, have already taken that challenge because they want to kind of go into a higher perspective in their spiritual environment. So they're like, well, I want to experience the killer life this lifetime, this incarnation. So in a way, it kind of makes sense.
And then also, like for instance, like an Adolf Hitler type killer. In the bigger thing, in the grander scheme of things too, it now allowed people to have that event happen, and then all these other nations were able to react to that and to grow from that. And it's like, he played a certain role for the advancement of civilization.
Exactly. And now I don't think they would allow another Adolf Hitler because we've now already learned that.
Exactly.
We've learned that lesson as a whole, as a universe. So if an Adolf Hitler were to try to come up again, he would completely be knocked out.
And that comes to like that topic where this polarity or this duality or this evil it's like friction. It helps us grow. It's something to where it's like a teacher. It's it's an agent that helps us overcome things and learn new things.
One thing that we've discussed before, that I've told you this many times, a lot of times when I see a person that's annoying me or that's I guess you could say touching me at a place where I don't like to go, like a person that's I think is doing a bad thing. Now my perspective on things like that, I look at the bigger picture, and I don't really believe so much in judgment, and I've told you this most of the times, like, I'm not judging people, I'm seeing the bigger picture. I'm seeing that they're doing what they're doing, and if it's annoying me, probably it's a reflection of me at the same time, but at the same time, I'm seeing the bigger picture because I don't see it as good or bad anymore as much as I used to when I was a little bit younger.
Right, and I have a quote that fits right in with that.
Okay,
since I like quotes so much.
Oh, Mr. Quote.
This is by Marcus Aurelius.
Okay.
He says, when someone wrongs you, ask yourself, what made him do it. Once you understand his concept of good and evil, you'll feel sorry for him and cease to be either amazed or angry. If his concept is similar to yours, then you are bound to forgive him, since you would have acted as he did in similar circumstances. But if you do not share his ideas of good and evil, then you should find it even easier to overlook the wrongs of someone who is confused and in a moral muddle.
Exactly, because you already understand
And
that.
it's interesting what he says about how you would have acted the same in similar circumstances, because
That's so funny. It comes to play of how I tell you everything's connected and falls into place, because you hadn't read really that one to me, and I'm talking about it at this point.
Well, but so because like you're saying, we don't know, these circumstances lead up to things, and if we were in, let's say, Adolf Hitler's position, we probably would have done the same things he did, maybe, more or less, but certain circumstances lead up to things, and you have the whole universe and all these energies just at play here, and things bouncing off and happening, and it's like these things to a degree are going to play out, so you can't get mad or upset about it, because these are just what's happening, and it's just life happening with us, and we're just to, let what happens happen and work with it. But it's not, it's not like all these things are,
And I think, in a way, though, in that situation, I think what happens too is that when you're overlook that annoyance or that thing that you think that person has done wrong, I think when you're able to not see it as anything, then you've already jumped a hurdle, because you've already experienced that lifetime or the thing that person has done in this physical form, that you've already jumped that hurdle, and you probably don't have to jump it anymore in another lifetime, because you've already learned the lesson. Because if you check peacebeblessed.com, read my daily inspiration on reflections. You're reflecting yourself on everything, on everyone, anything that annoys you that you think is bad, or, because we usually focus on the bad in this physical form. And if something still bothers you and you think is bad, remember that it's a reflection on you. It's something that you still have to work on, because everybody is a mirror of you. And I think that that's what it leads to, as far as the good and bad and whatever you think that person is doing.
Right, and it's interesting too, because bad things only have power over you if you let them have power over you. Like, for instance, when Jesus, was here, when things would happen to him, or anybody who's wise like that and, has that level of experience, it doesn't matter whether good or bad comes your way. It's how you react to it and how you handle it. Like, we have governments and, all these religious organizations and people doing things that we don't necessarily agree with or like, but it's how we react to them. It's what we do with ourselves and the people that we know. It's not pointing the finger at somebody for doing something that's their nature. It's how we react to it. It's what we learn from it. It's how we not let it affect our lives. We need to just get rid of it from us. We need to overcome it. We need to understand it for what it is, learn from it, but then understand that we can have our peace. We can have everything we want right now, regardless of what's going on, regardless of the evil that's happening.
And remember that you're actually feeding the egotistical world more when you react with a negative feeling, because since we're all energy, we're emanating that energy. Mm-hmm. So let's say you're watching something on war and it bothers you because it bothers most of the people, mm-hmm. of the world. So you're taking a look at it, and rather than send out what they call a bad thought, because your body is energy, so when you're reacting, the universe is picking up your energy. So as soon as you react and you send a thought out there, it started creating itself. A simple thought is sent out to the universe, and it starts happening. So you're already feeding to that war by you being angry at that war. Instead of sending it a peaceful thought, and you're sending an angry thought, then you're creating it to become bigger. It's just like fire. If you continue adding gas to it, it's going to continue getting bigger and bigger. So rather than that, you just change your thought, because remember, every thought creates. Every single thought that you send out, whether good or bad, is going to start creating. Because we're spirits, and we're not bounded by anything. and if we're only limited through this body form, and I guess like, that's a little, I guess, perspective on my side.
Sure.
And I'm not asking everybody to agree on that, but I guess with me it's more like I don't believe in duality most of the time anymore.
Right. I see it as like you kind of get to a point where in a way you understand it and you kind of outgrow it, I guess.
Yeah, it's so funny because
you don't think in simple terms of good and bad. It's like it's good as training wheels, I think, for children and stuff. Yeah, obviously, certain things like, murder, things like that is probably bad, but those things are just
how you perceive them, though.
Yeah, and they, I guess to degrees they have their places and they create lessons, they create all these things, and it's, there's something to be said, about morals and, that kind of stuff. But once you get to, it's not that you get to a level, but it's just that you start to you don't see it as simple.
You start seeing the truth behind everything. And the truth being that you know that you are this higher power, and that you have this guidance that guides you to
and it's kind of,
understand.
It's kind of like too, like religious people, they get a lot of their moral kind of guidance from like the Bible, or they'd say from God or that type of thing. And I mean, if you look into it, God is basically a person or a group of people just like us, who created us, or formed us similar to them. That God is basically somebody imposing their own views on us, saying this is the way we see it, this is the way you should do it, and then everybody does it, just like a child does what their parent wants. But eventually the child becomes a parent and the human becomes the God, to where now you have that power, and now you make your own decision on what's good and bad and what you want and what your own what your own whatever is. You become the God. You become the person who decides these things, because that's what we're working towards.
And it's crazy because going back to A Course in Miracles, it's crazy because I don't know where it's at in the book. I can't think the page, but it talks about we have a choice, okay, in duality, because you have a choice. It's God is all loving, and it's all light, and it's all good energy, and you have a choice at a point, and your choice is to be in the good or be in the bad, and that choice comes directly from your thoughts, from your mind. So just like you go into the darkness instantly, you can get out of that darkness instantly, because there's no such thing as darkness. There's no duality. It's your choice what name you give it.
And another way to look at it, darkness is just the absence of light.
Exactly. And it's the name that you give it. And at the point that, like A Course in Miracles says, at the point that you choose to be in that darkness, then you've made that choice, because it doesn't exist, because there's no duality there. It does not exist. So you've made that choice at that point. And just like you made that choice, you also have the choice of stepping out of it. What I just completely am baffled by in the Christian community is that, and I will speak about my grandmother, she's passed on, but she used to talk about God and Christianity, and you can't do this and you can't do that, but they always judge others. And that was something that I never understood, and I still don't understand. If I offend Christians, I'm sorry, but I don't get how you can say that God is evil and will punish his kids. That's what they say, that he'll punish his kids and only a certain few will be chosen. Because I believe God is an all-loving God. But in the perspective of life.
Yeah, and I'd say that somewhat ties in with their confusion on God, because the God of the Bible is usually a person rather than the universal energy. So they're confusing this person who is, wants to control people and is pissed. They're confusing that with the universe, where the universe doesn't freaking care.
And what's so weird is that they always give it a meaning of good or bad.
Yeah, I know.
Or if you're doing this, you're being good. Or if you're doing this, you're being bad. And God is going to punish you.
It's just like a simple way to look at it, I mean, right?
Yeah, and it's like, but it's so weird because they don't understand how limited they get. And I'm sorry if I'm offending anybody. And, if I am, I'm just speaking my mind. But I never understood my grandmother. I just never understood how she was such a loving person, yet she judged everybody else. And I was like, I don't think that's a God. God doesn't see good or bad. It just is what it is.
Yeah, definitely.
But
we're not done because I want to go into one other topic now.
Go ahead.
I wanted to. Okay.
Another one of your famous quotes.
Yeah, this is from the Bible.
Okay.
You guys might be familiar with the Bible. It's a book written by God. So, this is in Genesis 3:5.
Okay.
It says, "For God doth know that when in the days ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil." And this is from the Garden of Evil story in the Bible, where these Eve partakes of the tree of good and evil.
Okay.
And this is a really interesting quote. There's tons of ways this can be interpreted, and there's so many different ways to look at it. But I think an interesting way to look at it is in the sense that this fall of man, to where their eyes are open or they're able to see good and evil, is in a way like them, like it says in there. So you will be as gods. So these people now, they're becoming more like a god, which is in a way like a higher level of consciousness or understanding. They're getting like kind of an upgrade. Maybe before they were more animal-like or less intelligent. Now they're able to discern good and evil. They're able to actually, rather than just be like, let's say like, I mean, I don't know fully how a dog operates, but I don't know if a dog necessarily sees things as good or bad, or they have like a precision where they categorize things like that. But humans, in a way, do. I mean, at least the way we are, we kind of categorize things and we say good, bad, this, like it, don't like it. We have all these. That's what I think this verse is somewhat talking about, or this whole tree of knowledge, this whole good and evil story. It's humans were brought up to that kind of level now where we're like the gods, and we have that understanding, and it's kind of an issue too because we haven't quite mastered it. So we're working out the bugs of this intelligence, and that's kind of so. Well,
I do see it as that too, and it's crazy that you say that, because I think that at that point when the human form, I think before, when it was controlled by all these societies, or before by kings and whatnot, and they were like, I mean, they could easily be manipulated and controlled. I mean, still today, it's still similar to that, but I think people are more open to a lot of more things and are not afraid to speak out their truths. And the truth being that, we're all these powerful beings, and we're like God, and it's like, and before it would have been blasphemy for you to say that, oh, I am like Jesus, or I am like God, because it was like, it just wasn't something you said.
So, continuing with the tree of knowledge of good and evil, here's yet another quote. This one, I hope, it's a little longer. It's by Manly P. Hall, but hopefully it makes some sense. It might have to maybe listen to it a few times, I don't know, but I think there's something good here. Okay, he says, "Under the appellations of the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil is concealed the great arcanum of antiquity, the mystery of equilibrium. The tree of life represents the spiritual point of balance, the secret of immortality. The tree of knowledge of good and evil, as its name implies, represents polarity or unbalance, the secret of mortality. The Kabbalists reveal this by assigning the central column of their Sephirothic diagram to the tree of life and the two side branches to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Unbalanced forces perish in the void, declares the secret work, and all is made known. The apple represents the knowledge of the procreative processes by the awakening of which the material universe was established. The allegory of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden is a cosmic myth, revealing the methods of universal and individual establishment. The literal story, accepted for so many centuries by an unthinking world, is preposterous, but the creative mystery, of which it is a symbol, is one of nature's profoundest verities." So, I find it interesting because, I mean, he's kind of saying that that thing, that the good and evil is that balance, that duality, that we now are becoming, we have that individual type
Control.
control, that power. So it's, we're now like gods with that type of
Power. Whereas like the tree of knowledge, when they used to, I mean, when I first heard of it when I was younger, that they took out of the tree, like that apple, it was like something that, oh my God, they sinned. And I used to think about sin all the time, and every time I did something I was like paranoid, because I always thought like, somebody's watching me, now I'm gonna be punished because I'm taking the things that I considered bad, I'm taking them, I guess you could say, from the tree of knowledge, and I know what's bad and what's wrong, and by me doing the bad ones, then I'm being subjected to I guess I used to think I would be subjected to hell.
Sure.
And but then when you read something like what Manly P. Hall writes about, and you kind of like dwell into things like that, you start understanding, I think, different things in life.
And yeah, and it's weird because that's kind of like where you start to see the Bible as more like
a book that was written by man.
Well, that
just like you and me. I mean, it
but
was
you also
like,
see it as different interpretations and more like esoteric interpretations.
Exactly.
Like most people view it in a very simple way, where in reality it's talking about a more universal concept.
Well,
that's
many
hidden.
people still live by the rules of the Bible. I mean, I personally, I've told you this many times. I mean, the Bible to me is just a book. And if I've offended any Christians, I do apologize. And I really don't care, because I've told this to my mom. I've told this to her Christian friends. The Bible is just a book to me. It has a lot of meanings. It has a lot of beautiful quotes. And it has a lot of lessons to learn. But it's not something that I live by at all.
Why don't you go take a cold shower? Just kidding.
Well, no,
I'm
seriously.
joking, I know.
It's like, it's just like A Course in Miracles.
it's
another way of seeing things. All these books that I've read through, I mean, I read so much, and everything is a different interpretation. We were talking about the Bible the other day about, I just had a brain fart.
Well,
I'm sorry, but
keep thinking, because I love this topic. This one more quote. This is the last quote.
Okay.
By Manly P. Hall.
Okay.
Manly Palmer Hall. There are two great systems in the body of man. Two. The tree of life, which is the arterial with its roots in the heart. So tree of life, heart. And the tree of knowledge of good and evil, i.e. the nervous system, which has its roots in the brain. These two trees are physical manifestations of a complicated network of branching energy currents in the aura or superphysical bodies. Now that quote's really interesting to me. It's somewhat, it ties into like a whole chapter on my book, which, by the way, my book, Ruled by Ignorance, ruledbyignorance.com, R-U-L-E by ignorance.com. But it ties into this whole chapter, this whole like thing. My whole life kind of, I've had this thought about something, which is you have love and then you have reason, two different things, which in this quote he's talking about the tree of life, which is kind of love in the heart, and then you have the tree of good and evil, knowledge of good and evil, which is kind of reason, intelligence, intellect, rational. So you have like this this love aspect, which in a lot of ways is kind of a feminine principle, and then you have this reason aspect, which is kind of a masculine principle, but it's not that clean cut. But you have these two things, the heart and the brain. They're like working against, they're kind of working against each other in the sense that they're trying to play together. Like you might start off like as a loving person from the heart, and then as you grow in intelligence, you might learn certain things. Your brain might start undoing what your heart thinks in a way. You might become, I guess, evil in a way where you start going against your heart, because your mind doesn't, it's not a heart, it's going off logic. So
but I think at that point you're being more connected to your physical world, because when you're really interpreting things, you can I guess, like you're saying, feminine and masculine, in a way, it's like, I mean, of course, I don't believe in that, but you obviously, made a point with that. But I see it more that you can either connect in the spiritual sense of the way or the physical form. And when you're connecting more in the physical form aspect of things, you're more disconnected from your true self, which is your spirit.
Sure, but go ahead.
And I mean, that quote, I see it totally different than what you see
Really?
it. I kind of see it differently, but I would have to reread it again to go into that. But the heart and the arterial, I guess it would be a totally different topic, because to me it's something having to do with the chakras and the 7 energy points that I believe in.
Interesting.
And I kind of see it like that, or the brain and the heart, because I think that the brain and the heart connect to the mind, and then the mind connects to your spirit, and then it becomes a soul. And so it's kind of an interpretation.
That makes sense. I see that.
But I see your interpretation part of it too.
Yeah. And you're saying how the two kind of connect together to create
because
to create the soul, or to create your more
you start understanding things better, and you see everything connected to the arterial world with the heart. It's like you're connected, so everything you're feeding it is feeding to the body form too. Mm-hmm. All your arteries, that's what arterial means in this aspect of it. See, this quote, you see it differently. Here's
what I'm trying to say, I guess, in my view. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, you have these like world leaders, these businessmen, these powerful, rich people, mostly guys in a way, not always, but they're very logical, very smart. They study the crap out of things. They know all this stuff. They study esoteric stuff. They're very, very smart, but in a way they don't keep their heart in check.
Exactly.
Which is, like the Illuminati type people, or these secret societies. These people, they're freaking sharp, but they don't keep their heart in check as they grow their intelligence. So they're not keeping wisdom. They're out of balance.
Yeah, and that because they're just going by their physical.
And it creates these people that manipulate and control others. But they probably wouldn't be like that as much if when they grew in intelligence and reason, they still
kept their heart. Which is more the spirit.
But then you also have, which I don't want to be mean, but a lot of religious people that aren't very smart, but they have huge hearts. So these people are kind of in a way misdirected in their intentions, where they want to help people and do so much good, but they don't necessarily know what to do or what the correct thing to do should be, because they haven't developed it with reason. They want to do stuff, but they don't have it directed through their logic or through their
and I'll speak of Robert Holden, which is an author that writes a lot of self-improvement books. He's a speaker, which I talked to you about the other day. I sent you this through email. In healyourlife.com, I read this article with Robert Holden. He talks about how himself is more like a business type person, planning his life ahead.
Right.
And having all these conferences, because he talks a lot about improving your life, your happiness now, and being this real great spiritualist. But his wife, when they got together, his wife was more happy living her life, letting God guide her through her life, and not really planning anything, and not really being spontaneous, but knowing that the higher power of life was guiding her through everything.
Right.
And so I guess it plays down to that, because
that's true. Because
businessmen most of the time don't add that aspect of it, and then religious people do add that spiritual side, but don't add the business.
Right. So
So therefore they I guess, I don't like to say this, but they create sort of like an imbalance.
Exactly. Oh yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, if you're planning ahead your life, you're already creating, you're sending out all that, and you're stuck in those things because you've already planned it so far ahead. Whereas if you live your life knowing that you're being guided and God is, which is the way I see my life more than anything, and always knowing that you're being guided to your higher self, then it kind of balances you out. But I guess I just wanted to share that because it kind of
That's
was what you're
interesting.
saying.
Yeah, and to tie into that, it's like I think most people start out kind of more heart-wise or religious. I see religion kind of with the heart thing in a way, but what happens is a lot of people they'll maybe research it a little bit or look into it, and then it might pull them from that to more, they become more atheistic, which is more now in the mind, less in the heart. To a degree, it's not that clean and cut. But then sometimes people will kind of balance the two out, where they're kind of more spiritual, kind of where they fit
It's
in
a
that way,
balance.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it totally does
And
make
you have
sense.
that you have that relationship in anything. You have it in religion, you have it in government, you have it in just everything. It's
And everything. I mean, like me and you have talked about this within friendships, like the limited friendships that we have with others. It's like weird because when I'm with my friends out there, I mean, all they care about is, partying, doing things that are different. And when you start talking about things like this, they're just so disconnected from it that you become like entertainment for them.
right.
But it's not something that they're willing to change. They're willing to smoke a cigarette. They're willing to drink beer and get drunk and get crazy on the weekends. But tell them, why don't you study this or try to make a change for 2 hours every weekend? Or to them, it's like, I don't have time. But they can't have the time to go be out there for like 6 hours in a club,
Sure.
just doing nothing but get drunk. So, I guess it all ties down to whatever,
Right. And with that said, let's hit the club.
Woohoo! Well, were we in the club yesterday night? Were we or not? I was too drunk. Just kidding.
So I think we covered quite a bit with that.
Yes, we did. And visit me, peacebeblessed.com. If you have any comments, questions, you can always contact me via peacebeblessed.com.
And our website, truthcontrol.com. And you can check out our YouTube channel. Please rate, comment, and subscribe if you like what we're doing. And we will look forward to seeing you next time.
And if you have a suggestion on something that we can talk about and maybe make it clearer for you, let us know. We're starting off this. We're not experts by any means, and we don't mean to offend anybody. I do get kind of like weird on the Christian stuff sometimes, but it was just something that was ingrained in me growing up, and I'm so disconnected from it nowadays.
It is what it is. So yeah, please, any suggestions,
Peace
anything,
out.
we're totally open.
Peace out, homies, or
All right. So see you next time. Adios.
have a good week.